I'm also doing well. And I know as part of your work in that committee, you always have your eyes on what is happening within the power sector. In fact, yesterday, your ranking member actually held a press conference. You held a press conference in the committee, held a press conference on this issue. What's your own diagnosis of what is happening within the power sector?
Money.
Oh.
So that's the diagnosis. Money.
That is a problem of finance.
And usually, first of all, let me say good morning to your listeners. Usually, when you have a challenge, we have the immediate cause. We can have the long-term cause. But for now, the reason why when you go to your room, you cannot switch. When you switch on your lights, it doesn't come on. It's because there's no money. Of course, there are other issues bedeviling the sector. But for now, it is money. And why do I say so? If you look at all the reasons Gridco has always given, it is because there's no fuel to generate the plants, to generate power, or the generators do not have enough money to carry out their routine maintenance. And so remember that if I have a generating plant, I have to insure it. And as part of the conditions for insurance, I must also conduct regular maintenance. So if I do not conduct the scheduled maintenance and anything happens to the generating plant, I can't claim insurance. So generating plants are always very careful when they get to their schedule, the period for maintenance, that they go on, or else they are exposed to huge risk. So these two factors are purely down to money. Now, if you look at fuel, let's use fuel as an example. Nigeria, over a period of time now, because of the unreliability of Ghanaian utilities in paying their debt or honoring the invoices that are given to them, have insisted on payment on delivery. And so if they give you gas and you do not pay, they will bring you the next consignment. On the western part, where Ghana gas is, in as much as the utility, or for that matter, ECG is not paying for the gas consumed, because it is state-owned, usually they are still able to push the gas. But unfortunately, for gas, you need an infrastructure to be able to move it from point A to point B. And currently, the infrastructure is not owned by the state, even though Ghana is an equity stakeholder, but it is owned by a group of shareholders, and that is WAPCO, through the reverse flow. So any time that ECG is not able to pay for the transportation of the gas that they have not paid for anyway, WAPCO shut down their pipelines, because they will need to report to their shareholders. And if you can't be running a business where you are providing services and they are not paying you, and so they shut down their pipelines, or they reduce their volumes that come to the east. So that is why, even though you will have generating plants seated, because they do not have fuel to run, then you will have a shortfall in generation capacity. More importantly, you see, you will ask, then why is it that the state is not giving them the money to pay, for example, the transportation. So now you must remember that fuel, transportation of fuel, are all part of the build-up that gives you your tariff at home. So it's a pass-through cost. So if you were to come from my my electricity bills, and I'm paying for it, technically I am paying for the transportation of the gas, and I'm paying for the fuel itself. Even though, of course, I have to also pay for the energy, I have to pay for the transmission and what have you. So why is it that if we pay this, we are not able to get the money to pay the service providers? It is because of the inefficiency of ECG. ECG currently has, if you take their technical and commercial losses together, it's about 34%. So what it means is that, assuming the IPPs of VRA decides to provide them 100 Ghana cedis worth of power, ab initio, 34 Ghana cedis is lost. So you have 66 Ghana cedis to deal with. Now, you remember that it is ECG that is the collecting point of all these monies. Because remember that when PURC gives the tariff, and then we pay to ECG. Because they interface between all the utilities and the consumer. And so they collect the tariffs. So if ECG is not able to collect the 100 Ghana cedis worth of power they have gotten, already there's only a deficit. So they are unable to even pay all the various players, whether it's the person who is generating the energy, and that is the IPPs and VRA, or the person who is transmitting the power, and that is the question of GRICO, or the person who is supplying the fuel, and in this case, it is not only Ghana Gas, but we also have Letasco that will give sometimes fuel, liquid fuel, and then Engas from Nigeria that will give us gas from the Nigerian side of this. Then we are talking about the fact that they have to pay for the transporters of the gas, and that's WAPCO, both the reverse flow and the one that comes from Nigeria, the WAPCO pipeline that comes from Nigeria. So they have to pay all these utilities. But because from day one, they cannot even account for the 100 Ghana cedis worth of fuel, they already are at a loss. So government then decided to put in what we call the cash waterfall mechanism. It is a mechanism that is formulated in a way that it is all the utilities are arranged in a way, in a hierarchical manner and predetermined manner, that anytime the money comes, we distribute them in proportions. And the reason why it is hierarchical is the fact that there are certain invoices that have to be dealt with immediately, or else the others cannot work. So, for example, the issue of fuel becomes key. So you may need to pay fuel suppliers. Because if there is no fuel, the generation plant cannot work. Then the next one is the government will say that I will pay IPPs because they are private entities. Government entities can wait. So VRA and other GRICO can wait. And then, so there's a predetermined formula. So this money is put in there, and then they are distributed proportionally. Unfortunately, over the period now, it started with lack of transparency in how these monies were distributed, because ECG never made all the players aware of how much is in the kitty. ECG on its own just sat down and did the distribution. That was very, very opaque. Now, it has moved from lack of transparency to non-existence. They have stopped using the cash waterfall mechanism. And unfortunately, Senna, the cash waterfall mechanism falls under the Vice President's office. What ECG is now doing is that when they collect the monies, they just use it for procurement. And you and I know what they use procurement. When procurement comes in, what happens? In fact, all studies are on corruption, particularly governmental corruption or public sector corruption. It's hinged on procurement, whether it's procurement of goods, procurement of service, or contracts, or what have you. It is procurement that is the major source of corruption in public sector. And so when you have an organization more interested in doing procurement rather than meeting its obligations and settling its liabilities, then you know that there's a red flag that has been raised and that people must be interested in what happens. So because of all this, there has been debt accumulated. And because debt is accumulated, it affects cash flows in all the utilities. Indeed, now the cash flows have become more serious even for the government sector. Why do I say so? VRA used to manage its finances because of the export of power to neighboring countries. Because there they pay foreign currency. And so it's good money. If you look at the VRA books, what is making VRA look good, the books look good, is because of the power they export. But because there is no, we do not have enough generation in Ghana, they are forced, for example, to cut power to Cote d'Ivoire, to Benin, to Togo. I get the point I'm making. And so because of all this, it is reducing their foreign exchange earnings that they would have been getting. So that is one aspect. Then you also have the IPPs who have in arrears of almost 2 billion that ECG will have to pay or the state will have to pay. And so if the IPPs cannot do that, then it becomes a problem. So that's why I said that the current situation is purely money.
And I keep going back to this because if the problem is money, and I recall there were 3 things your government at the time said they did. First one, you dealt with the generation challenge, which nobody has, even those in government still complain about that. You left them too much generation. You said you dealt with the fuel challenge. And then there's also the matter of the financial challenge, which was supposed to have been dealt with. In fact, legacy debts were supposed to have been dealt with ESLA. If we still have ESLA, it's being collected in the amounts that they are being collected, then should we be having this challenge at all?
So first of all, let me start from your ESLA point of view. You don't have ESLA because ESLA has been collateralized. So even though the money comes in, it is supposed to be used in servicing the debt. So the state has, even though it's a tax handle, we don't get the money. The money is not ours. Now, it would have been better if ESLA had been used for what it was meant for. And you recall that, and because you have made it, I'm just trying to settle them in the various parts. So there was the issue of the legacy debt that had been occasioned, not under John Mahama, but it was from God knows when government started subsidizing energy, whether through the Nkrumah, the Buzia time or what have you, and these things came up and correlated to what we call the legacy debt. So, in as much as there were current debts that were being occasioned because of inefficiency, there was also the issue of old debt that was hanging over these utilities. So the government then said that, look, I am going to look at all the debt that we have in the energy sector, ring fence it, and then I will introduce a tax handle and give myself 5 years to be able to retire that. Whilst I retire that one, I will improve on the efficiency of the weakest link of the power sector. Remember that the power sector is made up of 3 functional zones: the distribution, transmission, and generation. And if you look at it, the weakest link in that value chain was the distribution, and that's the ECG end of it. So I'm going to improve on that, so that once I retire the legacy debt for the power subsector, I am going to ensure that ECG becomes efficient to be able to account for the power that is supplied to it. Because if they can account for it, it solves the problems in the transmission area, it solves the problem in the generation area. And that's how government signed in to the Compact 2 after the completion of the Compact 1 under Akufo. The government signed in for the Compact 2. And as part of the Compact 2, they were supposed to do two things. They were supposed to improve the efficiency of the ECG operational area and then the NEDCO operational area. So they called it the ECG operational turnaround project for the ECG area, and then for the NEDCO side, it was the NEDCO turnaround project. Now, and that's how the money was supposed to come. As part of the ECG case, because we are talking about ECG, in as much as we were supposed to invest in the replacement of obsolete equipment, we were also supposed to ensure that we inject private capital. And so we're supposed to have what we call the public-private partnership. And so we're inviting private sector to come and join. And that's how we started with the issue of the request for interest, other things, and then the NDC lost the power. When NPP came, that's how the issue of PDS came about. And so, my brother, a very simple procurement process was so flawed because of personal greed, because of corruption, because the quest for self-gain, for our unbridled and unquenchable greed. A simple procurement process messed us up. And this was what led to Ghana losing over $100 million that would have been used in investing in the replacement of certain equipment. And so you have a situation where just somewhere around 2017, when NPP took power, when the loss of ECG's loss were around 23%, we are now talking about 34%. At almost an 11% increase in terms of losses. And just for you to appreciate, just 1% loss alone is almost about 6 billion. So it tells you how much they lose as a result of the number of percentages that are added. And so because of that, we have not been able to deal with the continuous piling of the debt, because the debt keeps on increasing. That's the first aspect. The second aspect, the legacy debt, which, don't take my word for it, take the words of Boakye Jaco when he was being vetted. You remember that when he was being vetted, because he had been given all the documents and our various debt levels, he was confident enough to state that our total legacy debt, and not only in the power sector, the whole energy sector, that would have included TOR, BOS, and what have you, was 2.4 billion. Now, and that was what ESLA was supposed to be used in retiring. Government then decides to go and issue a 6-year and a 10-year bond for the energy bond under what they call the ESLA PLC. They raised a total amount of 10 billion. But unfortunately, we were not able to retire the 2.4 billion. Indeed, government went on to use part of that money to pay even for pensions, which is criminal. And so, in as much as we went and took the money, we were not able to retire the debt, the old debt, and the new debt keeps piling. And so the situation we found ourselves in December 2016 in terms of indebtedness of the whole sector, just the power subsector, not even the power sector, just our indebtedness to IPPs alone, don't talk about the other utilities within that, is almost 2 billion. If you look at what government itself said in terms of what they have, a document known as the Energy Sector Recovery Plan. If you look at it, they themselves had made a projection that if by the end of 2023 nothing was done, the total amount of indebtedness in the energy sector was going to be around $12 billion. Now, I asked a question in Parliament to come and give us the total indebtedness of the energy sector as a whole, and this was somewhere last year. Unfortunately, they came and they couldn't give it to us. I also know, because I have been a keen watcher of the sector, and I've also been a member of the Mines and Energy Committee for now entering my 8th year. I can confidently tell you that we did nothing in stopping the debt accumulation. So if that document that was authored in 2018 or 2019, January, that's the Energy Sector Recovery Plan, if that document is anything to go by, I suspect that our debt should be hovering around that figure of 12 billion. So if that is it, it is not surprising that the IMF said the sector that was posing the greatest risk to the collapse of our economy was the energy sector, because of the level of indebtedness. And that is one that has been done. So yes, ESLA was introduced. Yes, we're supposed to use ESLA for just 5 years to retire our legacy debt. And yes, we're supposed to use the Compact 2 to also stop the hemorrhage and maybe to improve on the efficiency of the weakest link of the power subsector. These two achievements have not been done. But unfortunately for the ESLA, the tenure, which was supposed to be 5 years, has been increased to 10 years. Ghanaians are still paying that, but they are not getting the benefits for it. So that is that part. Now, when you come to the issue of the generation, yes, you recall that it was a major issue because we came into power at a time when we had just come out of a crisis in 2006 and 2007 under President Akufo-Addo. And instead of solving the problem, because Akosombo water levels went up and we were overusing Akosombo, we thought we had solved the problem. It was just like when your sore stops hurting, you think it's healed. And it revisited in around 2012 thereabout. So we needed to have moved our generation capacity from the 1,850 that we inherited to about 5,000, because that was part of our policy. And that was supposed to take care of, one, our domestic use, and two, to be able to export to get money, foreign exchange, like what VRA is doing and getting money today. So this was the strategy for that. That was achieved. But remember that as we speak now, because this government had been singing on the issue of excess capacity, and you see, those who were singing those things, anytime you spoke to the practitioners, whether it is Gritco or VRA, they were very uncomfortable with the word. Because they knew that what the government was doing was they were treading on a dangerous ground. Because they were doing that, they were not also planning for new plants to come in. Because they are telling you that you have excess capacity. Why would you go and be putting in extra plants? As we speak today, we've almost wiped out our capacity. And I was hearing Nana talk. It's true that we do have installed capacity of about 5,200. But you see, if you have a 1940 car and it's supposed to be running 200, your capacity is supposed to be 200. Your installed capacity is supposed to be 200 kilometers per hour. It is about 50 years old. Even though it's the plate capacity is about 200 kilometers per hour, actually you may be doing just about 15. You understand? Because it's an old gadget. I say this because you have TAPCO, which alone is about 550. If you look at that, the installed capacity, it's old. It's an old generation plant. So it will not be as reliable as if you were to take, say, Sen Power, which was brought in around 2011 thereabout. So as I said, I'm talking of Senate. Now we're about 2011. So even though we have an installed capacity of that, our dependable capacity is woefully low. Indeed, I sometimes do not want to use the word dependable. I want to use available capacity. And if you look at our available capacity for the past 2 years, the available capacity and installed capacity is just, and then demand is almost or neck to neck. So it tells you that if we do not do anything, and in fact, the studies have shown that if no plant is being prepared to be brought on board, trust me, we will be entering into power crisis as a result of generation deficit, not because of fuel, but because of unavailability of generating plants. Because you recall that America is not on stream again. You know that. And
yes.
when we talk about the 5,200 installed, we add America, but America has been dismantled. You recall that the government has dismantled it from this and that. They were taking it to Kumasi. If you recall, that has not been installed. So anytime we use the figures, we do not see that these things are not part of it. If you look at the MRP, that's the Minerals Reserve Plant, it has also been dismantled. So it is not part of the installed capacity again. So but we still use the same old figure of talking about the 5,200. So even though, yes, the John Mahama government resolved that issue, if we do not do something, we will also be facing that as an additional challenge to what we do have. For the issue of what they call it, fuel. The problem with fuel, even though we had brought Atuabo, and the plan was to also add the second phase to it. The second phase is another story we'll talk about another day. If you see the corruption there, it's terrible. And it is one area I have fought it for God knows how long. It is so terrible that this government, if we allow them to implement the second phase of the expansion of Atuabo, they will be stealing not less than $400 million into their private pockets. And so that is another story to be spoken on another day. But even though they have not done that yet, you see that the finances of even that particular utility is at risk. So Ghana Gas now, if you look at the total amount of power, the debt that they owe, because remember that the gas is not theirs. The gas is for the partners. If you look at the total amount debt indebtedness that they owe, it's so serious. So we still have not, even though we solved the problem using our $1 billion from the CDB loan facility from China, this government's mismanagement has even put that particular asset at risk. So that is yet another problem. So yes, if you look at the whole terrain, I will tell you very clearly that any government that is coming in 2025, and I hope it is going to be the NDC, we are going to walk straight into a power crisis. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And anytime we have an opportunity to talk to His Excellency John Mahama, we have drawn his attention to the fact that if he's entering into 2025, he should have it clear in his mind that he's entering into a power crisis. And that is part of the problem that we have as a country to resolve.
That's an interesting prediction. Thinking about it, because we are currently as a country in a financial crisis, so money is a big issue. You said the problem is money. Currently, they can't spend the money. Any government that inherits this situation will not have the money to spend. So you're saying a power crisis is unavoidable?
No, that's very clear. Because see, the government is going to come, and I'm just using from today till the next government comes. You have competing needs. Government still will have to pay wages and salaries. Government will still have to provide the necessary resources for our health sector. Government will still have to do the same for our educational sector. We'll have to deal with the agri sector. We'll have to deal with the infrastructure sector. So if you have such huge competing needs, you would definitely have to let go certain things. And so power, you cannot resolve all the problems in the power or the energy sector. And so you will go into problems. You think the NPP does not want, as we speak today, if they had the money to go and buy the fuel or pay the fuel suppliers and then all the various utilities, they will not do that and save themselves. But because they do not have it as a result of the mismanagement of the sector, that's how they now will have to go and issue such disgraceful and, in my very humble opinion, a despicable statement like what was issued on their on their page about the current power crisis. You see, I think one of, I don't know whether it was you or the lady who was there in the studio who made a statement that, okay, granted that the 600 plus transformers and other things that are all overloaded and therefore they are causing some triggers. What about the NETCO catchment area? The NETCO catchment area is made up of the whole of the 5 regions in the north, Northern Volta, Northern Broahafo, and part of Ashanti region. So what about those ones that go off? How do they handle those ones? You see, sometimes when a liar is lying, he doesn't know, and that's how it's a problem in my language. When the liar is lying, he doesn't know that the person who is listening has sense. You understand? You can't get up and lie the way you lie. But I've always said that if Samuel Dubik Mahama was someone who had worked in the sector for long and was really a proper practitioner in the sector, he will hesitate in issuing that statement. But unfortunately, he's more of a politician and a conduit to make money for the ruling government rather than solving the power crisis that we have in Nigeria. And therefore, he has no problem issuing such disgraceful and undespicable, what they call it, statements that he issued.
Bawa, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so the solution is certainly clear. Find money. Maybe lawyer. You can lend some money to them.
Busia.